All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a special guest on. We have Aaron Tucker of Aaron and Archer, dog handler extraordinaire. You've done your accomplishments are a laundry list, so we'll just dive right into it. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm doing good. How you doing?
Great, great. It's a Monday. We're like I said, we're firing on all cylinders. So this is it's awesome. It's a great way to start the week. So, one of the things we jump into right away, man. Like, what got you into dog handling?
I mean, as a kid, I was obsessed with dogs. I had a German Shepherd when I was a young kid, and then I don't know. I was always fascinated with the canine world. Even in high school, I worked at a kennel. I was a professional pooper scooper. I tell everyone, I was like, I feel like I learned the most about dogs by cleaning up their poop and feeding them every day. So I don't know. It's just kind of, I guess maybe it was in my DNA when I was real young. My mom, when she was alive, she was a breeder. We had lots of dogs, and she bred Springer Spaniels, and then a German Shepherd. And so, yeah, maybe it was just in me.
Yeah. So where did you grow up then that your mom was breeding animals? I mean, typically that takes a lot of, let's say land, but kennels and whatnot. So
I mean,
where did you guys
I'd
grow
say
up?
she wasn't like a big time breeder in that aspect. Just one dog at a time, litter. But I grew up in Texas and then Mississippi, and then I'd say I spent majority of my time after my mom passed away in Florida. I guess I classify as a Floridian now, even though I
Yeah.
joke about anybody that's from Texas. If you were born in Texas and 30 seconds later you move out of this, your family takes you out of the state, you will still claim you're a Texan. Like
Yeah.
so,
Oh, dude, there's a lot of pride there. I totally get. I mean, people that move to Texas are like they are Texas, and it takes over your whole identity. Which is like cool. It's like it is what it is. I feel the same way about Minnesota. It's not hardcore, but it's just somewhere we always return back to. A lot of Minnesotans almost feel that same way. Like you're like, you know what? I like the seasons. I like the cold. I like the snow. The misery
yeah.
of it. So it's just kind of like it just comes with the package. So, but
Oh
no,
yeah.
I have buddies that moved down to Texas, and they're not even fucking close to like any kind of cultural to Texas, and then suddenly they're wearing shit kickers and an 8-gallon hat, and they're like Texas, this is it. This is the last stand. This is we're it. Come and take it. And you're just
Yeah,
like,
right.
dude, bro,
I do
you're
own a
like,
pair of cowboy boots, but I don't. I
yeah,
wear
yeah.
more flip flops than anything. I mean,
Like,
I'm Florida now, I guess. So
yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. Awesome, dude. So, like, getting into the dog handling, I know we had talked prior on the phone. So, you came through the LEO world. Like, how did you, like I said, you wanted to kind of do that from the beginning. So, how does that evolve? Like, how do you? Because a good friend of mine up here was thinking about going to be a dog unit for like the Bloomington Police in Minnesota. It's however you I don't say train, but like he was telling me some things that I never knew, which was like you live with the dog, which makes sense. Like so, when you become canine at the police unit or at the police level, LEO level, like that's your dog. Like that, they live with you, they stay with. So it's a big deal when you move on. It's not just like going into SWAT or being a sniper, coming back, or whatever.
yeah,
It's
your
like
job's never over.
yeah, yeah, it's a full on commitment. So he kind of backed out of it because his wife wasn't too keen on having like a hardcore canine in the house. They got 2 kids, but yeah. So what got you down that path, and then how did that path go?
I want it's kind of a weird path. So I specialized in human remains detection. So
Mm.
we were not exactly the happy side of canine. Like it wasn't like
Oh yeah,
all the cool wild bites. Even though I had a really gnarly German Shepherd, and he did have bite work in him because we would do searches in some areas where I needed he may need that ability. But my background was in that it was in finding the lost souls
mm.
that we worked on cold case files, serial killers, pretty some stuff that if you heard about it, it had really wild stories to it. But then when you're actually doing the searches, it was really a lot of me and my dog kind of out alone. Like we had our perimeter, there security and stuff would be there, but we would kind of be out there just working it by ourselves. And then you would tag a location, and they would come in, and a lot of times all you need is a bone to get a conviction because all you need is that DNA.
Mm.
It's not normal to find a finger without a person on it in the woods.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so that was that my background kind of came in there. Like I wanted to go the traditional canine route, but then it kind of turned into, one of these things you didn't see. Now you're seeing a lot more HRDs. Canines are getting used a lot more. Now we're using them in even in the sex trafficking world. We got dogs now that find electronic devices. I mean,
Yeah.
these people, especially here in Florida. We got the tractions and stuff like that, and they will hide thumb drives inside outlets. We got dogs now that'll find those.
Yeah.
So we're using dogs to bring missing children home because of that scenario. So the cadaver side, it was just kind of like see a need, feel a need. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
there's nobody else doing it. I'll do the cadaver side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's crazy you say that because I'm pretty sure it's public now, but isn't that how they found Jared from Subway? This was a few years back when it broke. I had some friends that they had done ride-alongs. They're journalists that went along and were like with some of the dog units, and they were like, yeah, our guys can sniff out basically like thumb drives or like
yeah.
and I was blown away because I was like, I would have never in a million years thought that a dog would be, but it's perfect though. Like it's small. You would never found it. You would, as a human, there's no way. I mean, it's fucking tiny. It's just, an inch long, and now it's going to be somewhere hidden in the house. So that's pretty well. I'm sure you probably can't go too much in the detail, but I imagine that it's a certain scent then that gives off, because I mean, there's a lot of metallics in the house. So like I said, we don't have to get into it, but I gotta imagine that's like a challenge to be like, hard what a USB drive smells like. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't want to go like too in
yeah,
depth into like
yeah,
what
yeah,
they're actually detecting, in a
yeah,
scenario
yeah,
like that, because we don't know who's watching. However,
yeah,
I
yeah,
can
absolutely,
tell
yeah.
you like the power of a dog's nose is not even modern technology can't even replicate what a dog can find, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, put it in they like, just so you can think, like we have like 2 maybe 3 million sensory receptors in our
Mm-hmm.
nose, which you think that's a lot until you find out that a dog has anywhere up to 400 million sensory receptors. So like where we see in color, and you walk into a room, you're like, oh my, everyone makes fun of my green walls. Even my girlfriend's like, we got to paint these. But you see green walls, the dogs smell green walls. They like everything
Mm-hmm.
that out there has an odor to it. So while we see in HD, dogs smell in HD. So
Mm-hmm.
um, they're able to actually categorize smells inside their head and kind of like a Rolodex, and that's how they remember. They're like, okay, well, this smell gets me a reward, and all they need is just the smallest trace of it, and they can track it to its source through training. A dog has to be taught, like, it
Mm-hmm.
has this superpower. And now as a canine team, you bring that superpower out of the dog. But a lot of dogs have abilities that they never get used to their total capability. But these working dogs that are out there, they're getting pushed to the top of their what their DNA is programmed them to do, and it's
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable what these dogs can find. So.
Before we keep going with this podcast, I want to drop this week's discount code for 9line Apparel. We're not just a brand, we're a lifestyle that celebrates the spirit of freedom, courage, and American values. Go check out our gear, including hoodies, glassware, flags, jackets, and hats, patches, and much more. All material is ethically sourced, so every shirt you buy is free of slave labor. As a veteran-owned and operated company, we take pride in giving back to those you've served. Your purchase helps us contribute to charitable initiatives supporting veterans and first responders. This episode's discount code is ANA20 for 20% off 9line Apparel products. ANA20. Not 10, not 15, but 20%. Not 25% because that's a bit excessive. So get over to the store and get yourself 20% off your next purchase. While you're at it, like, listen, and subscribe to the 9line podcast for future discount codes and more conversations with amazing guests like today. Now back to the podcast.
That's insane. So, can you kind of go through the process then? How a dog, when you train them, how long does that take? Like, what's the commitment? From a puppy to the handlers. Like, what's that whole process like?
I mean, every dog program kind of is a little bit different. In every state, like there's state how the dogs have to be, X amount of years old and stuff like that. But I hate to put anything into a box and say, okay, this is how long it takes. Because if you get a dog that's on fire, I'm not going to wait to test it out at like an Indian DDA or a Napwater or something. Like they have requirements of age of how old they have to be. I mean, like Archer, for instance, I'm retired and he's actually my PTSD dog. But I just got bored and I was like, I'm going to certify him in cadaver. Let's just see how well. And from the day I introduced him into odor, it was 30 days and he passed the NNDDA certification with flying colors. So it's kind of like humans. Like, you have an inner genius. If the dog has an inner genius, you find it, you run with it. I don't put a time frame to it. Like, why hold them back? So, but every program, every state, they have different requirements of how old a dog can be before they can take a certification. But I start them pretty young. If I was to do detection dogs and open up a business like that, which I'm not. I'm kind of in a whole different business now. I start sending introduction as all in play as a puppy. If that dog is showing really good signs of like drive, wanting to really like get in on the ball, even like really crazy high food drive, I can utilize that to start to form it into behaviors. But you might have a puppy that's on fire, and then at 6 months old, they're like, I don't care, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's where, as a trainer, you got to have the ability to start, switch gears and be like, okay, well, this isn't motivating anymore. Do we wash them out, or do we see what actually motivates them? And a lot of dogs, it depends on how much time you want to put into it. A lot of programs don't have that time. They need dogs out there, so they can't spend, 6 months on a dog. Whereas a private civilian that's going to be like, say, on a local search and rescue team, they'll put 6 months in. They won't care. So it just kind of depends. It's kind of case by case, but doing your research on your bloodlines, finding dogs that come from a long success rate of working dogs increases your probability of having a dog that'll do that work for you.
Yeah. So what is kind of the success of the bloodline, which is, it's always cool to talk about that when you talk about genetics, because in animals, you see it in humans, but then it's like, it can be spotty, but just the way we engineer dogs, you know what I mean? Like, or we breed all the types of dog breeds that there are is insane. You have everything from like the little yippers, but then now you have these like Cadillacs of like, they're finding hard drives and they're finding missing people. And, so what are kind of some of the best breeds, or is it just about that successful bloodline? Like you don't quite see like a flappy-eared, bloodhound, running around, it's typically the canines or what, the breed, that stereotypical breed. Is there a certain breed that's just like, these are pretty reliable and they're successful?
I mean, I guess I would put it to, well, what's the job you want to do, right? Like, what are we trying? What's the job we want to? What are we trying to accomplish with this dog, right? You wouldn't put a forklift in the Daytona 500.
Yeah.
But and you wouldn't put a race car inside of a warehouse. Two totally different jobs. So knowing, what breed is going to excel for the job that you want to do, your pretty safe bets in detection work is your classic, your German Shepherd, your Malinois, your Labs. But I mean, I've seen German Shorthair Pointers that are rock stars. I've even seen Jack Russell Terriers. Like, you give me a little Jack Russell Terrier, I'll take that into hotels all day long looking for thumb drives. Those guys are little workaholics. So it really, I hate to put it in on any breed. Like, I've seen mixed breeds that are just rock stars, and then I've seen purebreds that are like, what happened? Are you eating paint chips when you go home? So I hate to put it on just like, okay, this is the best breed. I think it really comes down to like, selection from that litter, testing the dogs. But no, I hate to say like, this breed is the ultimate breed. I've seen pit bulls that can do the job. So, I mean, I'd say it's just like a person, everybody has a capability and every dog has a capability. It's just, are you going to bring it out? And so I don't believe in this is the best absolute breed. Like, the Malinois is the best breed for me because of what I do and my personality. Me and Archer just really mesh. But would I suggest that for somebody that is non-active, couch potato, like, oh, I'm getting no, dude, don't. You're not gonna have a house. You're gonna eat your drywall, bro.
Which is, it's awesome. That's hilarious because we have a dog and he's a Rhodesian Ridgeback, and I can't remember what his other breeds are, but he's super chill. He's like, he don't even have to walk him. He lays on the couch all day. It's like perfect dog. Like he's a snuggler, and he's not. He doesn't. I've only seen him bark once, and I've heard him bark 5 times, and
Oh,
that's it. And in the span of the 5 years he's been alive, like so, he's a perfect family docile dog.
oh
So
yeah.
so it's like it's a but I grew up with labs, man. I grew up with a golden. It was a golden retriever or lab, one of the, and I mean the dog was just an absolute, Terry was awesome, but yeah, he'd lick you to death, and you'd grab his tongue and you hold it, and and you let go of it, and
Yeah.
he'll start
I mean, I've
licking you
done that to
again.
Archer, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
suggest a stranger do that to Archer.
No, 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 yeah, exactly. Like, but like Kip would just keep doing it. Like he never learned it. Like he was just all right and just wouldn't learn his
Yeah.
lesson. Like it was nuts. But yeah, I mean, I guess it is like I said, it's up to your personality or what you have in your home. Like as much as like when I was younger, I was like, man, that'd be awesome to have a canine, or whatever was it Malinois or is that the
Malinois, yeah.
yeah, 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 for like protect the family. I remember watching movies like that would be dope, and then they're just like they have to be walked how many times, like feed and train, and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, that's not that's
Oh
not my
yeah.
lifestyle. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go for a 3 to 5 mile run every single day.
Yeah, Jesus, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
And then
great.
I come
That's
home
yeah,
because we have another dog, my girlfriend's dog. He's over there. He's a husky. He's not really much of a, yeah, I call him more of a cat. He likes to lay in the window and then he howls
yep,
at people. But
yep,
then I come home and I take him on a walk. He doesn't really like to run, but he'll
yeah,
walk. So yeah,
yeah,
it's a passionate labor, but I mean I love it. It gives me things to do, and he
yeah,
loves
yeah,
running. I like running him. I don't want to say I like running anymore. The older you
yeah,
get, it's not exactly
yeah.
fun.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it goes from like fun to maintenance to just kind of like, God damn it, like,
Yeah,
oh my
exactly.
goodness.
You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, 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 yeah.
now I'm not running because I want to look good. I'm running because I don't want to die young.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome. So when you guys are sussing these things, like how in the police department, how many dogs are typically allocated then to certain crime divisions, or is that just based off to the budget of what the that
Yeah, that's
county
based off the
or
budget,
state?
the size.
Hmm.
It's really based off of that. I've been out for quite a while, and because my specialty, I was kind of off to the side. I was FEMA, so I wasn't
Hmm.
in the regular canine unit. So
Hmm.
they had, they would have anywhere between. Just really depends on the size of the city, the budget.
Yeah.
Every state's a little bit different. Dual purpose dogs, and then they had quite a few like single purpose dogs. You're
Hmm.
starting to see a lot of agencies, go to single purpose. I tell everyone like bite work's awesome. It's great. It's really fun to watch those dogs just annihilate somebody.
Hmm.
But the true that actually that apprehends people, but what actually puts people in jail is the dog's nose.
Hmm.
So while that's and you're starting to see a lot of agencies even just go to single purpose dogs because they get a lot of life out of them. Whereas
Yeah.
your dual purpose dogs is very hard on their body, so they'll retire a lot younger than these single purpose dogs. A single purpose dog, they're working 10 to 12 years old, depending on their drive if they'll still go. And the
Hmm.
single purpose, a lot of them are done at 6 or 7 years old, depending you know
Yeah.
so a lot of agencies are, switching to those, and they're
Hmm.
using German Shepherds as single purpose. Like that's not that doesn't matter if the dog's going to find stuff. So it really will boil down to
Yeah.
the agencies and the
Hmm.
state and all that, because every state, they have different
Hmm.
requirements. How many hours does it take, to become a canine? And I know ours it's almost like 3 months of training you got, and that's as a team. So basically, like if you get a brand new dog, even though if you've been a handler for 8 years, you still have to go through that 3 month training process with that dog because you have to certify with that dog. So it's
Hmm.
not just my dog went through it, now you get it. No, you have to certify as a team. So
Got it. Okay. And so when you're working with FEMA or doing the recovery, was there any specific cases or like, thing like jobs that you worked that really stuck out to you, like, missing persons or, that kind of stuck with you?
there's one that haunts me that Falco. We never found him, but it just haunts me. It was some murdered children.
Oh, yeah.
So that still haunts me. That almost kind of drives me to like bothers me like to the point where like I kind of want to use Archer, like, because there's some areas where I wanted to search that we didn't go, and I'm like, we could go, but I'm out. And yeah, so
Yeah.
those, the kids still haunt me like a lot. There was one case we worked in particular. They called me for, we were actually down at Task Force 2 training in Fort Lauderdale, and like, we need you to get up here like right now to do this search. And I was like, well, I'll be there tomorrow morning at 5. Well, you need to get here now. I was like, well, first of all, it's 99 degrees out. My dog's not going to find them unless they walk straight over because of the heat. And I'm in Miami, and I'm like, they're not going anywhere. He's a cadaver dog. They're not. It's not a hot track. So we finally get there at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was for a neighboring agency, and the chief was like, well, this is the area we want you to search in. And so I popped Falco out of the truck, and I was like, I put him on the ground. As soon as he came out, he went into odor. His body immediately changed. It was just like up. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna pop him off here. I'm just gonna cast him out. And he beelined it. I mean, you could tell his body language was full on. He's in odor. And the chief was like, no, we want you to search this way. And I was like, I will after I follow my dog. And we went through this wooded area. He pushed through this wooded area, and he never took the easiest path. He was a big, gnarly German Shepherd. So he's pushing through these vines, and I got thorns. Like, that's why you always wear, the long sleeve blouses. So you never know where your dog's going to take you. And he pushed me right through, and then he went right up to the guy, and I was tangled in the vines. And the guy he committed suicide. I think we can say that here, right? Like,
Yeah.
Well, I was stuck in the vines, and he walked right up into it, and it was we found him, and it was very weird and eerie too, because it was someone, a dude like just younger than me, a grown up, but then the family all wanted to meet me, to tell me and I turned him down, just because, like, for my own mental stability, I try not to look at it as a person. It's an odor. Not that I don't want to pay respect, but dehumanize it. But like 20 years in, you start to carry a lot of stuff, and like when you start to put a name to those things, it can start to really weigh on you. And I mean, I went through a lot of like talks with therapists and stuff, and they were even like, "It's probably a good idea that you did it that way." So it was just, but that one really stuck out just because like everybody on scene was like, "No, you need to go this way," and we went the other way. And then I have another one that was just ridiculously funny, and I'm sure that guy's probably in jail, but
go for it.
We were searching. We were doing. I mean, it was a mass search for these children, and I was searching a concrete plant where they make, they have all the gravel and all this kind of stuff, and we were searching there for quite a while. And my dog was getting tired, and we were getting tired, so I was going to give him a rest. And we had to walk quite a ways back down this road to get to my truck. And as we're walking back down this road, there's this huge field and 3 houses on the other side of this field. And the wind was blowing in the direction from those 3 houses. And as soon as the wind blew, got a gust right into Falco, his nose, bam, he just popped his head up, and he starts pulling on the leash. So I'm like, I'm just going to pop him off and see where he goes. Like, so I let him loose. He beelined it to this one house. He literally walked back and forth on the wall, and then went, how like bathroom windows, they look different. They have that kind of glass you can't see through. Well, the bathroom window, it's elevated, and it was cracked about like this much. He jumps up, puts his nose on that crack, and alerts like that. And I'm like, oh my God, what the heck did we, I mean, it was a solid alert. So I go up to the deputies that are with me, and I'm like, hey, this is what I had. This is my behavioral change. This is, he had an alert. And they're like, well, what do we do now? I was like, well, I think at the very least you should do a knock and talk. So they go and knock on the door. I'm not even kidding you. This dude opens the door like Buffalo Bill, full robe. Hello, officer. Just like that. Like, I'm sitting in the back, and they're like, do you want to bring I'm like, I'm not going inside, y'all. He invited the officers in. They walked around. They come out, and they're, trying not to laugh. First thing they said is, we're definitely opening up a case on this guy. Like, we're going to be following up. They're like, do you want to know what your dog alerted to? I'm like, well, yeah, I kind of need it so I can put it in my... Well, apparently there was a bloody toy in the sink underneath the window.
Holy shit.
And they were like, so they're like, we can't, your dog, I mean, it was an easy 300 yards across that field. They're like, I can't believe your dog went to that. And I'm like, he's, I
Yeah.
mean, I trained him on trace amounts where I would hide Q-tips of blood in the bark of trees
Yeah.
in a couple acres. So he was pretty young on that, but I'm like, that was pretty crazy. And then later that day, we saw that guy going to the grocery store, and he was still in his robe at the grocery store. So
What did they end up getting him on, or what was you said he's in jail now?
I don't know. I mean, I know they opened up. They definitely opened up to follow up and see what he was up to. But it was because that was such a mass search. It wasn't even in my county.
Oh, okay.
Basically, as soon as that happened, it was inside the city limits. So the deputies from that county turned it over to the city investigators.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm I don't know. It was
Yeah.
the weirdest. I kind of wish I went in the house at that point, like,
Yeah.
but just to
See
see
what's
what.
going on. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Was there? I know guys have a lot of, it's always the worst stories, but is there like any like solid success stories that you came across, or or had in your time in experience, like some happy endings per se?
I mean, yeah, I mean, my dog Falco definitely. He's got one guy off the street forever. It was wild. And a lot of times, if it's a really big case, profile case, I would bring in a second canine just to confirm before we went real kind of crazy. But we were working this case, and the guy wasn't being like super cooperative, but then he was playing like he was going to be super cooperative. So they brought him out to the scene like from a distance, right? And they were like, "Well, we're going to turn the dogs loose." Well, I bring Archer out, or not Archer, Falco out, and as soon as we get out of the car, we start going, and this prisoner, he's over way across the field, but he can see us working. And my dog came out, he beelined it right over to this one area where there was this ditch. And as soon as he saw Falco go over to that area, he confessed to murdering the woman.
Oh wow! So like just
Like,
he's like, yep,
he confessed.
yeah.
So just the fact that Falco beelined it directly into that area, and I mean he was searching like really hard, and I think we ended up finding like a bone of like, I mean it was only because it was probably about 4 or 5 year old case, but yeah, it did, at that point he confessed to everything right there. So they
Oh
came up
wow!
and they were like, you can stop searching. He confessed to everything. I'm like,
Yeah,
that was pretty awesome.
yeah. That's good. So then is there? And I'm kind of going down the rabbit hole in my mind. Is there then any? So as long as the scent just stays, is there like when you're training or just like scientific knowledge, like is there like a time where scent like starts to fade away? Is there like a kind of like after 10 years or 15 or is it just the environment? Like it rains here all the time, or it just every environment's different. But is there like a general scale of a scent will stay somewhere that you could solve a case, or you could come, like I said, came back 5 years later in a ditch and he found it?
Well, I mean, that's where, and that all comes down to like the capabilities of the dog. Like, so
Okay.
cadaver is one of those odors where it changes. And it's one of the ones that, it can be, I mean, they have dogs. I mean, I've got bones. It sounds really weird, but you can actually, they're, the bones that you see in like the medical schools and the skeletons, those are real human bones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can buy those for search and rescue. And they come untreated and stuff. And those are actually, they can be over 100 years old. So, I mean, you have dogs working cases and finding graves that are 100+ years old. So there's not really a time limit. It's more of like training a dog, having the capability to teach the dog to find an odor like that, and very, very trace amounts. But there's a lot of theories on it too, where, if a body decomposes in the woods, the adipose tissue and stuff like that, because as we decompose, we become part of the earth, right? So the plants absorb it and you become part of that plant, and then it's off-gassing the person. That's one theory. And it made a lot of sense because like I took a class about it, and they were they asked me, when you're doing these searches, you ever notice like when you don't get a good alert, but you get a lot of body language out of the dog, and they're constantly flicking their tongue and like licking on the leaves, and they're just circling this one bush. Um, and then they may find like a bone in there, and they're like, well, that's because the adipose tissue. Now I'm not a chemist, but I mean, I was like, well, it makes sense as you're decomposing, the plants absorb, you're breaking down and you're becoming part of the earth. I don't know how well like that by itself without some kind of DNA would hold up in court. With that by itself, I don't know. I never had to rely on that part, but that part does make a lot of sense. But no, your body breaks down, and the biggest question is like, oh, if I hide a dog in the grave, no, that doesn't work. Like we have a different protein in our bodies and that's so hiding a dead, a dog, like if my dog alerted on a fresh grave and we were digging down and they hit a dog or a deer, I'd be like, no, dig down further. Like that's like I proofed my dog off of that on purpose. Like I would get pieces of deer, I would get hog, I would get gator, anything. I mean, I'd pick up pieces of roadkill and use it during training scenarios and throw it out there, and my dog would walk right past it. So
it's almost like eliminating the senses, like you kind of like blacklisting these, like don't worry about this one, this smell, that's this, and you identify that. You just kind of go through that list. Yeah. So is there? Oh man, this is cool. I love talking about this. It's great. So was it like you said that guy confessed? Was there? Did you ever find anybody alive? Like anybody that was missing? Was that something that
we never looked for people that were alive?
Okay, so even the search and rescue ones were more like, hey, this isn't a good scenario. We got to.
When we showed up, we're purely recovery. So that's why I said not exactly the happy side, like. And I never put that on my dog because sometimes there's people that still have hope, and I don't want to, you don't want to be like, oh, that dog's here and it says HRD or cadaver on it, so it would just say do not pet. Like I don't want to, that's not my place. That for that family, that's they still have hope, and if my dog doesn't find anything there, then there may still be hope. So I didn't, you never know. So
exactly. It's like if you don't find anything, that's a good thing.
That's actually a good day when we don't find. And unless we're looking to put somebody away, and like I said, I do miss that being retired. Like I kind of do miss that, like the hunt of that, and knowing like I'm putting some really bad people, because these aren't like, this ain't like, we're not talking about a little bit of weed in a glove box. We're talking about somebody that did one of the most heinous things that you can do to another person. So
exactly. Is there any big famous cases you worked on? Like obviously just the nothing wild, but like is there any serial killer cases or anything like that? Or you see like John Wayne Gacy. There's like 30 under his house. Like, do you ever come across anything like that or deal with any of those cases? Like that?
We actually got called to come up. Remember the one that was going on up in New York where the guy was killing all the prostitutes along the beach?
Slightly. What year was that? It does sound familiar.
2000 and like maybe 14 or something like that. But then he got caught. So we got called, and they were like, it was like, hey, can your dog? And I was like, yeah, man, get us up there. And then he got caught like the next day. So I'm glad he got caught. But then at the same time, it was like, I really wanted to work. I really wanted to work that case. And then, I had the one with the murdered children and the stepmother, but there was a lot of evidence. He'll never see the light of day again. But I never found the children. So that one was national news. And then of course I got tons of questions like, were you working Casey Anthony? I was like, no, I didn't do that one. So, but that was a pretty big one. And the dogs, they did use dogs, but we weren't used on that one.
So then, like I said, we had talked before. So you're working the FEMA side or like the cadaver side. What got you? And it's a fun fact, and you can obviously dive into this. What got you into bomb sniffing dogs for Afghanistan and all that stuff?
That was kind of crazy. So I had a dog training business kind of, on the side, just taking clients here and there. And I met the guy. He ends up he's like one of my best friends now, and he's one of the directors for the State Department. I trained his dog,
Mhm.
and he called me up after I trained his dog. He's like, "Hey, do you know anything about working, bomb dogs and whatnot?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Absolutely." I was like, "I went to school where they sell all these dogs, and so through craziness, like next thing you know, they're like, "Well, do you want to set up our program for us for the State Department in Kabul for the embassy?" And I'm like, I mean, I'll give you all the knowledge that I have to help on setting up that side. So yeah, next thing you know, just from because of that one connection of he looked me up, he knew who I was from like the working dogs and stuff like that. So he was comfortable hiring me to train his personal dog. And next thing you know, I get asked to take part in creating the canine program for the embassy in Kabul. So that was pretty wild, and I got to select all the dogs and put up the not fun side, the infrastructure side, a lot of the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
SOPs, SOG, all that, the
yeah,
stuff that people no one ever hears about, but it's needed, but it's boring as anything.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. What years was that?
Oh, I just took down my freaking thing. When was it? It was like, man, was that like 2009? I want to say, yeah. I mean, it all blends together. Like, and I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
took
yeah,
it down. Like, my girlfriend moved in, so I had to take everything got moved into the office. So all my American flags
yeah,
and everything are on this wall. So now it's kind of like,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I have an award from the ambassador there because one of the dogs that I selected and put there, the day that the program went live, a truck made it through like the first level checkpoint, and the
Mhm.
dog alerted on the truck, and apparently that truck had enough explosives in it to level the embassy. So I
Jesus.
get a
Yeah,
call at freaking 3 o'clock in the morning. And when you're doing this and you're working with these contractors, when you get a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's usually not. It's
yeah,
not a good one when you're over here in the state, and like they're like, "Do you know what your dog just did?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, who'd he bite?"
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what happened? Did he bite somebody important? And these are single purpose dogs. We didn't do dual purpose at that point. And they're like, "No, this truck made it through. The dog alerted on it. Like they were able to evacuate that area, isolate." I'm like,
Mhm.
"Holy shit!"
Yeah,
I'm like, I didn't go back to sleep after that because I was all jacked up, and I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Damn, I wish I was there," type
yeah,
of
yeah.
thing. So that was
Well,
pretty cool to know that I took part in that, and like, there's a lot of people. I was a team. It wasn't just me, but being part of a team that put that together, that saved all those people, and a lot of those people have no clue that even happened. It was pretty wild. So
yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's I was a well, I've done multiple tours to Afghanistan, but like or combat deployments. I did my first big one in '08 to '09. But we went around the embassy, but I ended up doing whips contracting for the Department of State,
okay,
2012, 2013. So we ran into a lot of the dog guys, obviously going through those checkpoints and going
oh
to the
yeah,
embassy constantly. So when there's a V bid or a truck bomb, that's no fucking joke. That thing will wipe out. It's huge. I mean, we've seen the devastating ones in Iraq, so that was always pretty cool. We always liked the dog guys. They
yeah,
were great dudes. They were, you know, by that time the contracting started getting kind of weird, and so a lot of them were trying to get. That was like the beginning jobs, not so much the canine, but the gate. We call them gate guards, and that's how they would get enough experience to then come into the mobile side of the house, which we were mobile protection.
yeah,
So those guys had a really shitty. They had a really really shitty barracks, and housing conditions. Yeah, it was. We felt bad for them, and they were making way less money, and
yeah,
things were getting weird. But no, those dogs, man, they were awesome. They were lifesavers. We ironically didn't have them over, but where we were, and we had suicide bombers coming through, vest bombers,
yeah,
that got through just like what you talked about. They get through the first gate or the first little passage, and then there's like typically a second one that reevaluates, and that same thing happened. That they got through. It wasn't vehicle bombs, thank God, because it would have wiped out half our compound. But they
yeah,
were suicide vest bombers, and so they got the first one through, and then the second truck they're like, hey, hold on, and then they just shot the dudes, and then just all hell broke loose. So and then started
yeah,
clacking off. But like they were the Northern Alliance, and if in Afghan culture, which I'm sure going building up the program, they don't like dogs. You know,
No.
Arabs,
And
as you know, typically they look at dogs as like just dirty animals. They don't, you know, whereas for us, it's in our culture. One, we love them, but it's also part of our military culture and our, you know, our police and finding dogs. So it's just, they just didn't have them. You know, they like,
yeah, I hit a lot of roadblocks when I was building up the program because I wanted to teach the dogs to search people for the
Mhm.
vests, you know, so they could walk through. But that was like, woo, no, cannot do
Yeah,
that.
right.
Like
Yeah.
that is like a no.
Mhm.
So we had these other things that we were actually putting together, and it never came to fruition. I mean, it was, but it was like pressurized Connex, and they would go through one at a time and have the
Mhm.
dogs on the outside because it's blowing the air through,
Mm.
and that never came into fruition because then you know we're not there anymore. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, my big push was okay. This is cool, but you're right, like. Working gates because I worked at the cruise lines, you know, working the port of entry. Oh my god, that's the most boring job ever. And you think, oh, I'm
Mhm.
working my dog. No, dude, it's so boring.
Yeah.
Like this is so working those gates, it gets really boring. But I knew that you know the threats, the big threats that there is a you know the vests and stuff like that. But as soon as I started trying to put a program together to having these dogs, you know, in the crowds and whatnot. I mean, I was even going to do it where I was like, well, can I do like German Shorthair pointers, so they're non-threatening and they're just they're loose, and so they would look like a stray, but they would follow the person.
Mhm.
And they were like, no. And I got that like right away from they're like,
Yeah.
no. They're like, we
Yeah.
like what you're thinking. That's
Yeah.
really cool. And like, I'm like, dude, it's so possible. Like, I know a DEA agent who he had the funniest story. He literally, you would never know this guy was an agent, like full beard stuff. He would go sit out at these country bars, you know, like these, you know, just dive bars, and he would sit out there on the back of his truck looking like he was just some drunk, and he had a German, you know, German Short pointer. He would run around the parking lot. He would hit on a car. He'd throw the ball, so it just looked like a dude out there throwing the ball, and he would just tag it in, and the car would leave, and they would bust him down the road.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, you have these non-threatening dogs, and I was like, you can get a little, you know, little German Shorthair pointer, just playing around in the, you know,
Mhm.
and they start to follow this person. Yeah, there you go. They're
Yep.
like, no, they cannot sniff humans. I'm like,
Yeah. Well,
that's
that's that weird, again, you know, with Afghanistan, it's that political correctness, or we gotta, you know, we gotta be respect the culture, but you know, at the same time, there's, you know, it's pretty significant who you're fighting. So it's like they're clearly using, you know,
yeah,
suicide vest bombers. I mean, that wasn't out of the regular. You know, that was a
yeah.
pretty common thing. But we don't want to.
Unfortunately, we're the
Yeah,
only
yeah.
ones following the rules, right?
Exactly. Like you're like, oh, we need to respect the culture. I was like, yeah, but they come in with vest bombs, so I think it's okay.
Yeah,
Like especially when it came to, like, if you're walking into the UN, or like you're walking into the ambassador's residence or whatever. Like you don't have to stick them on the Afghan whatever. But if you're coming into the U.S. embassy, you sure as shit, you know, should have been doing that. You know, but
yeah.
again, that's the culture. You know, that's the weird. Department of State was always trying to play that game. You know,
Yeah.
they even hated us whips protection guys, but then they loved us when shit would go sideways. So, you know, they're like, don't be so violent. I was like, this is a war zone. Where the fuck do you think we are? You know, like,
What are we here for?
yeah, yeah. They're like,
Whole
well,
point.
Kabul. I'm like, yeah, well, you know, two valleys over, shit's popping off, and there's bombs going off. Like, what do you know, this is 2012, 2013. So it was an
Yeah,
election year. You know, they never. I mean, that was back then. That was before, you know, the evac, or during the, you know, the evacuation in 2021. I mean, back then they didn't know if they were going to stay. That was a big hot topic for the. You know, it's like weird thinking back. You know, like I remember 2012 when, you know, that was a very big contentious topic. Was, are we pulling out? Are we leaving? What's the funding? You know, like what's
yeah,
that going to be like? So yeah, those were some pretty volatile
yeah.
years.
Well,
But
we all saw how that shit show went. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, believe me. Yeah, and so
yeah.
yeah, that's wild. So then, so you did that for the Department of State. I mean, that's some crazy thinking outside the box. Is there anything that you could say, except without giving me details, that's like really blew your mind, that you're like, oh my god, I would have never thought in a million years to use a dog for this situation in this manner? You know, like,
I don't
without
know. I
giving
think
anything
there's some
away.
people working on some really wild stuff
Yeah,
that I got to take a little bit of part in. For on the EOD side, that I had to sign, you know, NDAs,
yeah,
and I don't want to like. But
yeah.
I will say, like, the innovation of using the dogs in those scenarios, like I don't even think that what was being worked on was given you that was even given out to you guys. It could
Mm-hmm.
what they were doing, and the cool that would have saved tons of lives,
Mm-hmm.
but it was still in the like kind of that beginning stage while they were developing it. It may be developed now. Like this, I went out and did just a couple training scenarios with this group, and it was wild. It was really wild.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they probably have perfected it by now.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it would save a ton of lives, and like the dogs really were able to work very independently, and just do their jobs. Like, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you look at these guys on the teams and these SEAL team dogs. Like these people, they're at a whole different level. Like
Mm-hmm.
people watch John Wick, and I'm like, man, those dogs ain't got shit on those dogs on the teams.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Those are Hollywood. Like I just did I'm more of like an influencer now, right? So I was at Global Pet Expo, and a talent agent saw me in Archer and was like, "Oh, I want to represent you, like this and that." And I'm like, "Okay, well, can you get us in like John Wick?" She's like, "Does he do bite work?" I'm like, "He does Hollywood bite work." She's like, "What's Hollywood?" I was like, "He does enough bite work where if I got called for a TV show, we could do the TV show." But I was like, I would not put my dog in a combat situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I get people on social media, "Oh, like send that dog into danger." I was like, I'm not sending my dog into danger. I got
Yeah,
lead. That's what I carry
yeah, yeah,
this for. I'm like, I
yeah,
ain't sending
exactly.
my dog in. Like those days that's my best friend. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
clearing my house. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I was like, that's not how this works. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those dogs that are really out there on the front line, and I've had the honor to meet some of the trainers and like become friends with them, and like those dogs, like the movies that these people. First of all, the general public couldn't handle a dog like what they select to be in those scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
But these men and women that are in there and they're training these dogs to that capability, it's gnarly. Like
Yeah, yeah.
if you can go online and see the Israelis what they do with the canines, that's
Mm-hmm.
like that's some crazy stuff that they
Yeah,
do. So,
yeah. Have you heard anything? Speaking of all that stuff, I mean, have you? I always like to talk about EOD because the explosive side of the house. But yeah, when I was a scout sniper, we were next to the EOD guys, so we got the same thing. It was all top secret TSSCI shit. They were showing us. They're like, hey, you can't talk about this. This is some of the tactics that we're using. I'm like,
yeah,
fucking EOD, the guys that blow up the bombs we find, or like they go to another level, which makes total sense. They're front line when it comes to bombs and explosives. That's the people you want out there trying to hunt
yeah.
all that stuff
Those
down.
guys are next level crazy because
They are, yeah, dude.
takes
It's
some.
like, yeah, we had some great EOD guys, but in that same breath, there's definitely, they had that. It was the God complex a little bit. They got a bit reckless too,
Yeah,
but also in their mentality, when they get bit, that's it. It's that their
they're
motto is
done.
initial success, complete failure, and so
Yeah,
there is no in between. So you had to be pretty wild to be running around with EOD, especially in those years. Those years were fucking insane.
yeah. Those
But
guys are nuts. It's like that
yeah,
one
yeah.
shirt. I'm a bomb tech. If you see me running, follow me.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, but yeah, have you heard anything? Like I said, things are rapidly developing everywhere. I'm just keeping my pulse on it. Have you heard anything from like Ukrainians at all, or anything with what they're doing with the? I'm just curious, just because, like I said, the Israelis, they got everything going on in Gaza right now. But even pre that, Israelis were always pretty up to snuff with stuff. But like with Ukraine, we're seeing just me as an infantryman and scout sniper and a tactician. It's like you see stuff that is developing that is just so far outside the box, but yet so efficient. Have you heard anything at all on the Ukrainian side of the house? Because it's like trench warfare,
Yeah,
house to house stuff,
not
battlefield.
really. It would not surprise me though because that's you're kind of Ukrainians. I mean, if we're not careful, we may be in that scenario. But I
Mm-mm.
mean, that's a lot of. I'm sure over there, that's a lot of Red Dawn type
Yeah.
situation. So a lot of people, you're having to think out of the box to stay alive,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of dogs. There was somebody on, I forget his name, but he was getting his dogs from there, and actually he at the beginning of it, he flew over there and pulled 20 dogs, got them
Mm-hmm.
out of the country like right in the beginning of it. So I mean, I mean, dogs have been part of war since
Yeah.
war,
Yeah.
so just recently we started using them, in human history for their full capability. I mean, originally they just started out basically as like centurion dogs where they were just there to, massacre people, just
Yeah.
attack. But now they're using them for, the EODs. I mean, I mean, anything you can think of, they're out there to find it. But,
Hmm.
yeah, no, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of what they're doing with it.
Hmm.
Like I said, I've been out for a little bit, and so it's been
Yeah.
nice and peaceful for my brain to not
That.
think about that. I miss it
Yeah.
sometimes. I talk to my
Yeah.
buddy at the State Department. I'm like, "You got anything for me?" And he's like, "Do you really want?" He's like, "You have to work if you come back." And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of binge watch TV and make TikToks now. So he's like, "Yeah, you'd actually have to work." And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe not."
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's always keeping that, it's sometimes, like I got friends now with influencer space, but I always keep my foot in that world. And it's always tempting, obviously, but I always like to stay in the know in case something pops off again, so you're a little bit informed
Yeah.
on what's going on, but no,
Yeah, I
I
do
agree
get to
with you.
talk to some people, and it's kind of, when you get that, I can't talk about that, then it's like, I'm going to pay close attention to your body language now. You know what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean? Like,
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yep,
yeah.
yep. So then, after all this stuff, now you've gotten more. You want to go down the road of kind of the, like I said, the influencer slash entrepreneurial spirit, or path, I guess you would say, with working with the brands that you're working with and developing that. So what has that been like, or what got you started into that?
Um, I had no intentions of being an influencer. I
Yeah.
kind of think of influencer as kind of like, it's kind of silly. I don't know. But at the same time, I mean, I've had the honor to work with some amazing brands. I've worked with Nine Line. I've worked with Black Rifle Coffee,
Mhm.
Valor Fitness. I mean, I've had some awesome brands team up with me, and gotten to meet just some of the people that I never thought I'd actually get to meet, hang out with, be friends with. It's like still talk to them, and
Mhm.
I get a lot of them are big social media people now, and they give me tips, and they're like, you really need to get into YouTube, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, I can't make long form content. My attention span is only 15 seconds. That's why Instagram's perfect for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
So. Um, but through all that, I mean, here recently, I've started my own brand, and everything ties into the dogs. So I run a lot of races, and I was running a lot of like obstacle course races with my dog. And when you run across a race, at the end of the race, you're given, here's these recovery drinks, here's hydration drinks. So there was nothing for my dog. So I came out with my own brand, which is Doggy Rate Unleashed, and it's the first sport hydration dog for dogs.
Mhm.
That officially goes on sale on Wednesday. We unveiled it at the Global Pet Expo, which was wild to have like, here's all these professional people in the dog world coming up and seeing my packaging.
Mhm.
And every one of them was like, dude, this is insane. Like, who
Yeah.
designed this? I'm like, oh, I did. And like, these are,
Yeah.
graphic designers are like, oh man, that's really cool. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, thanks. Um, so yeah, it officially goes on sale, and then it'll only be available on my website for the first little chunk of it, because we have big vendors, people wanting to carry it and stuff. So, but I wanted to make it available on just through the website for the first kind of launch, to give everyone an opportunity that wants it before it goes into stores,
Mhm.
to get their hands on it. So
That's awesome. That's so cool. So, and it's wild to think about. Sometimes you have that. It always happens. Someone thinks of something and they just don't do it. And then sometimes you hear something, you're like, why didn't I fucking think of that? Especially like for decades and decades, there's been Gatorade and there's all these sports drinks and even like energy drinks now. There's a billion of them. At
yeah,
breweries and beer, and no one has thought. Excuse me. And no one thought of an electrolyte drink for your pets,
yeah,
or
it
your
was really
dog,
cool
yeah,
because it's actually been out for just a little bit in Europe.
yeah,
So the dog sports in Europe are really big, like canicross, bike
mhm,
joring, like they're really big into these endurance sports with their dogs.
yeah,
Um, and I just stumbled across it, and I started talking to them, and I'm like, man. And my words exactly, and when I put up my proposal, I didn't think they were going to accept it, because like literally, I'm in this meeting with this guy who's like a billionaire who owns it, and
mhm,
I was like, listen, I just want to Americanize the shit out of this.
yeah, yeah,
It's exactly what I said to this guy. And he's like, okay, give me a proposal. I wrote him a proposal. He didn't even counter back. He
yeah,
accepted it, right? I was like, shit, I was not expecting that. So we were off to the ball running. and redesigned, reformulated. And, you know, a lot of big question is like, is it endorsed by a veterinarian? And I'm like, well, no, it's created by veterinarians. I didn't create, like the veterinarians created this, the blend. And it's really cool because it's, you know, it's a hydration, but it's also got prebiotics in it, which help with the gut health, which help with the immune system. But then it's also got amino acids in it. So you got that burn while they're exercising. And, you know, I used to teach canine medicine as well as, you know, when I was teaching like SWAT operators and stuff, I would teach canine medicine because we get canines that get shot. And, you know, a big worry is bloat, you know, so you don't want a dog out there working with a full on belly of water because it's sloshing around. So it's a drink that allows them to also utilize the fluids in their body. It's isotonic, so it's fully absorbed. Whereas, like, you know, us, we take stuff, if our body doesn't need it, we just piss it out. This is different, so it's completely absorbed. The dog uses every bit of it, and that way you're not having to work a dog with a full belly of water. And yeah, the veterinarians, like, it's crazy because I'm in constant communication with everyone. I'm like, I need this kind of thing, and they're like, yeah, you're gonna have to chill out for that. There's a lot more of a process than just like going into the kitchen and making this. It's a very long process to come out with the product, how it's cooked, how it's even packaged is. It's a very big process, but through all of this, like the goal here is it is a Europe, because everyone's, you know, yes, it is made in Europe. However, once sales reach a certain point, then production will be moved to the U.S., and which will enable me to create U.S. jobs. You know, and then, you know, by that time, hopefully, I'm going to have a really strong give back strategy as well. So my initial goal here is launch the product, then get sales to a point where I can bring production for the U.S. to the U.S. side. But right now, like, I mean, it's made in Ireland, and the steps to get it into the U.S., because, you know, it's very, very strict, so it's super safe. And it has a 2-year shelf life. So like when you get it, it's not like I got to use it right away. You know, you've got 2 years to use the product. So.
That's awesome. You know, it's funny that you mentioned the manufacturing side of the house. It was cool listening to you know, Elon Musk is on a whole nother scale, but he talks about prototyping is the fucking easy part. Creating the product's the easy part. It's the mass manufacturing, if you can figure that out. You know, he's talking about automobiles, which is absolutely insane. But like, even to the small scale, you know, when guys are like, oh, I created a t-shirt and a design, like, cool. Well, now I have 100 orders for it. Okay, well, how are you going to make that? You know, that's a little bit simpler. But when you start getting into food and beverage, into handling, into, you know, sanitation, and then, you know, you're going.
Well, it's got to be inspected, you know? Like, especially with food. Like, we're going through the process because I've got a distributor that wants to carry it in Australia. Like, is on the boat ready to start selling to all the stores in Australia. But it's a process when you're dealing with the different countries and governments, because you're talking about, you know, is there animal byproduct in it? Yes, it's got chicken in it. So we have to have our plant inspected by all of them, and so it is a very, very long process. And he's right. It's one thing to come out with the idea. Like, it was the most. They sent me pictures of the production line of the product being made, and it's pretty wild to see my product, you know, being made and going across there. So like, people don't realize that. Like, you know, once I have the production here, it's not just we have people running the machines. You have to have a chemist on staff at all times, because all that has to be constantly batch checked. Every batch has to be third party checked as well, to make sure, like, you know, we didn't, you know, there's all kinds of things that can change, and you have to have mechanics on staff in case the machines that, you know, so it's not just somebody's running this conveyor belt or in a kitchen doing this. It's a pretty big, and to me, it's a very big deal, because, you know, my big goal is I want it made in America. I want that label that says made in America. But as a business person, you know, okay, well, we have the production set up over here, but once sales get to a certain level, I'm going to bring it. It's going to be here. And I'm pretty confident. I'd say I'm giving 18 months. I should be able to do it is what I'm thinking. Which to me, it's just imagining being like, dude, this crazy idea is putting food on other people's tables, and is allowing people to put their kid in college or buy their 16-year-old their first car. Like, that's a pretty wild thing to be like, this went from some wild, like, thought to, hey, there's people out there that are like crushing it, and you know, their families doing stuff. And it's like, I was part of that. They
Yeah.
played their part. I'm not saying I did it for them, but I got to be part of that. That's pretty wild to think that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, and that's a broader topic too. Bringing manufacturing in back into the U.S. And COVID really showed the lack of what was going on. Like or
Yeah.
our weaknesses, especially with China and reliability of all that. And for years people always say, well, it's going to cost a shitload of money, and no one's going to buy it. And it's like, well, that's not true. And you see, once somebody makes that, and it's a big investment. By all means, it's a big investment.
Yeah.
But it's like you start hearing more and more stories, and the quality control too. By the way, like Origin USA, I know that's a Jocko's brand or whatever. I haven't
Yeah.
worn any of their stuff, but I've heard people that have, and they love it. And you're paying
Yeah.
$100 for the jeans, but it's worth it. Like I got Go Ruck boots. I believe Jason McCarthy. I know the backpacks are 100% made in the U.S. They are $300 a pop. But are those
I
are
have two of them.
yeah, exactly.
That's my travel bag. If I fly, I've got
Exactly.
the big Go Ruck because you can fit so much stuff in there.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
I've
The
never felt a
quality
better
is-
backpack. It's insane. They're so good. But he makes, I believe, their shoes. The exception of like one piece is made outside the country because they just can't do it. But the boots are the best boots I've ever had. I went into Ukraine, and I had interviewed Jason. And so he gave me a backpack because of my background. I worked with special forces. So he's like, hey man, here's a backpack for free. I was like, oh, thanks. Didn't quite have a need for it. And then I went into Ukraine. I was like, this is the perfect scenario. So I took a photo, posted it, like, thanked Jason. I'm on my way to Ukraine to go help evacuate civilians during the first weeks of the war. And he hits me up, literally like DM was like, bro, what's your foot size? Here's a new back. Dude, I got a GR4 or whatever. I think it's like $400. And then I got the shoes when I got back, and they're the Mac V Sog and boots. And I literally threw them on and walked around Ireland for 2 weeks. As soon as I got back, I was home for 2 weeks and went to Ireland for 2 weeks with my family. It was the most comfortable boot I've ever worn in my life. And I told everyone, I was like, spend the $185. You'll never. They're the lightest. They're the most comfortable. They're worth,
and they're going to last you forever.
And they're going to last you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you bought something else, it may be cheaper, but you're going to buy 3 pair.
Exactly.
For the life of that one. So, that bag, I've flown all over the place with my Go Ruck bag, and it's always funny. I always get inspected because I put dog food in there, so it's always a guarantee you're going to get, TSA is going to hit me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've flown with all my clothes and a bag of dog food in that thing, and it fits perfect as a carry-on. It's a perfect size.
Mm-hmm.
I have that, and then I have one that I ruck with because I do a lot of rucks.
Yep. Same.
And it just holds up good. Whereas if you try to ruck with weights and just a crappy old backpack, it's going to rip it out. It's just
exactly.
It doesn't wear right. It's going to end up hurting you. So I have 2 in that, and they're 5-6 years old, and they look exactly like they did when I got them. Like, lights everywhere.
And I've been to the where they repair them down in Florida. This is back in 2020, and it was cool. Like they just had guys on staff that were just like, that's what they did. I think they had like one dude who was a veteran. He's just like, and it's a skill, and it's a fucking skill, and it's just that like I said, bring it back to what you're doing. Like, yeah, it's out in Europe now, but the fact that then as long as it reaches a certain point, you want to bring it to the U.S. It's a big deal. They're trying to bring microchips back. They're trying to bring just the simplest stuff back. I think when the veteran community was kicking off, and it obviously is the 9 Line Apparel podcast, and it's cool seeing 9 Line on how many. When I talked to Tyler, the CEO, he's like, I got 200 people I am responsible for, and it's a lean 200. Like I've seen the operation, both the head shed and the people on the ground, because I've been there a bunch working with them. The t-shirt manufacturing, they provide t-shirts for other companies, and other than the t-shirts that they source from Honduras, I believe it is, it's everything is manufactured in the US. All the prints, all the, it's so cool to be like, yeah, this is American made, like,
I've been there. It's a massive operation. I was
exactly.
You go in the back, it's like, it's not just a coffee shop and a t-shirt store. There's like a football field behind all of that, more than a football field. Like it's, it's massive. Like I've camped there like I used to
Yeah,
park.
yeah,
When I would drive, I would plug in and
yeah,
park there, and they knew me. They're like, "Oh, Aaron and Archer are sleeping out back." There's that 30S damp out, and I would just plug
yeah.
in, sleep there, and then head up to whatever race I was going to. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But that's amazing
yeah,
what you're doing that. Like, I think that is really cool. That is, and that's always my fantasy. I always, like, oh man, I'm a filmmaker. I go after, making projects, and I love doing that. And when you start working with a team, when you start getting budgets where you can work with teams, that's awesome. Because it's literally just a buddy of mine who is like talent, and he's just bringing the one person on and getting them paid
oh
well.
yeah,
It's like one, but it's just like that means the world to everybody. And it's just like, yep, we locked the project in, and I got a job for 3 people.
yeah, and
That's
that's what I
awesome.
did. I mean, the first
We
thing
love
I
that.
did when
We
I
love
took
that.
this over is I brought on my buddy Luke, who we
Oh
did
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
with, and
yep.
it's really funny because he managed the social media, and I used to do content, and I'd message him, and I'd be like, "Is this okay to post?" Because you don't want to go against
Yeah,
their
yeah.
idea and brand, and he had to remind me. He's like, "Aaron, you own the company. You're." I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
"Oh yeah, I don't." He's like, "You don't have to ask me permission anymore." He's like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
"You're the one." I was like, "He's like, you're steering this ship," and I'm like, "Oh crap."
yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, "Okay." So he had to remind me of that, which is funny, but. He's like, I love the way that you think with the, because I try to do funny stuff with my dogs. And if you
Hmm.
see us on social media, it's not, we're not trying to be tactical. It's really just, have a relationship with your dog. Like,
Yeah, yep.
it's live a better life, get out, be active, have fun. It's not,
Hmm.
it's not about being all serious and tactical. Like I hardly
Hmm.
ever, I don't wear camo. I don't,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have a
yeah.
beard because I'm lazy and I refuse to shave. And,
No, no.
you spend your whole life being clean shaven. Like the day I retired, I threw every razor in the house away. I was like, I'm
Yeah,
never shaving again.
exactly.
So
You get that
it's
little
not, it's not about trying to look cool. It's about being lazy.
yeah,
So
that little taste of rebellion, and then you're like, it's just nicer not to shave every day.
yeah, it's just, hey, this is great. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
got to trim it up, but
Hmm.
but
Hell yeah.
that's really what I'm trying to do is inspire others just by living better, and hopefully, they're like, oh, I didn't realize like having a relationship with a dog can open up that. And there's a lot of people from our community, and I've done a lot with the veteran community, LEO firefighters and stuff like that, and like the the biggest question I get is how do I get off all the meds? And I'm like, well, don't do it the way I did
Hmm.
it, But a lot of them coming from that and they get out and they're done. They kind of become shut-ins. They don't
Hmm.
really, So having the dog for me beyond his task training that he's able to do for me is getting me out of the house and getting me back into keeping me active in society because isolation is very bad,
Hmm.
which is really nice in this community. And I think that's one thing I am gracious for about being an influencer is open me up to other people, veterans, first responders, where you don't realize like you see people walking and they're fighting that same demon that you're fighting just on a
Hmm.
different battlefield. And it helps you. It just helps you when you get that time, like kind of fellowship together, and they're like, you see this guy walking down the street, he's like, looks like total badass warrior, and then you're at it, and he's like, dude, he's thinking the same thing. Okay, I'm not alone, and they're
Yeah.
thinking the same thing. They turn around, they're saying the same thing. Oh, you did this, this, and this, and I'm like, yeah, it's not that big a deal, and they're like, oh, that's the coolest shit ever, and I'm like, and I'm looking at them fanboying, like, oh,
Yeah.
and come to find out, we're all still struggling, and
Hmm.
so that community is really nice, and I think that it's really nice. Like when I've come up and done events with Nine Line and like with Black Rifle, and just you get talking to everybody, and it's just like, okay, we're out and we're fun, but we're in the same boat together, and
Yep.
you realize that you're not alone. So it kind of helps you in those quiet time battles where you're like, all right, these feelings are not just isolated to me. There's other dudes and girls that are having the same thing, so I can push through too.
Yep.
So
Yep. Absolutely, and I agree with you too. I mean, that was something. I always tell people that my most isolationist moment was right after my first deployment back in '06, and I got in the sniper platoon, so tried out, got in, and I shifted over, but I almost quit just because I wanted to go back to my squad, which was they were like a block away, but it
uh,
felt like a million miles. You know what I mean? Like you just felt alone. Your girlfriend breaks up with you.
yeah,
You're away from the guys that you just spent your brothers after our first, especially the first deployment I went through was pretty hard. And so, and to immediately separate from them in a successful manner too. I mean, moving on to Scout Sniper Platoon it was a pretty big deal. but it feels like you're a million miles away, and it feels like that. I remember going home on leave, and I just didn't want to be around anyone. Didn't want to go party. Didn't want to do anything. I just didn't want to do shit because I had done so much,
Yeah.
And you do find that group, and I agree with you. Like finding that group, and sometimes I always tell people my therapy was going back to Afghanistan with that group of guys as a contractor. Like that, it's like you got to travel 1,000. You don't have to travel 1,000 miles, but but I agree. I think going to these things and meetups, it's like everyone's going through that same. Especially, by the way, 15 years on, like I said, we're both older, and it definitely feels like people are, back maybe 10 years ago, everyone's still pissing vinegar. You're still kind of, in it, but
Yeah.
now we're reaching our 30, like mid 30s, late 30s, 40s, late 40s. Everyone's a bit more, I don't want to say calmed down, but it seems like a little more calmed down, a lot more open to talking about stuff, like
Yeah.
things have caught up to everyone. It's caught up, some it caught earlier, some it caught later, but it's caught up to
Yeah.
everyone. And so
I try
agree
to,
with you, yeah.
yeah, when people ask me about it, I'm like, the best way I think I can describe it is, it doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing, and pray to God you never have it happen to you. Like, if
Mhm.
you never do, man, my hat's off to you. But the ones that do, and if they're watching this, this is the best way I can describe it: is life is going on normal, and then your body kind of turns on you, and it's like a
Mhm.
corked champagne bottle,
Mhm.
and you're just standing there, and it pops, and
Mhm.
it's like I don't even have control. Like I remember standing in the fridge and just
Yeah.
out of nowhere bawling. I'm like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is wrong with, like, it was just I'm like,
Yeah.
and then you get talking to doctors and they're like, there's some real, they tell you to read these books. And of course, you're resistant to it. Like, this is stupid. I've done this. I don't, my body can't be turned. I read this one book. It was like The Body Keeps Count. It's a really good book to read,
Mhm.
even if you haven't experienced it, but maybe, you're in that field and you're working, it's a good book to read anyways, just so maybe if you start to feel that, you can head it off before it gets there. But The
Yeah.
Body Keeps Count. It's a pretty good book, but yeah, even my therapist like, you need to read this, and I'm resistant to it. It's like,
Yeah.
that's stupid. I don't want to read. Is it in
Yeah.
movie form, like, type of
Exactly.
shit? Like,
Yep. Yep.
but it's a really good book to read, and I would say, don't be. I was the same, so resistant, not wanting to go talk to somebody, and
Mhm.
I was really fortunate to have a really good doctor initially, and then now I have a really good doctor. I still have someone that I rely on, that I'll talk to from time to time,
Mhm.
because there's just, it's nice because you don't want to talk to it with your girlfriend, your wife, your husband, your boy,
Yeah.
someone on the outside that just listen to you. So I think that's super important. I think that it needs to be, you know, more accepted, because that old theory of like, oh, you go get help, your career's over. That
Yeah.
was basically what was ingrained in us.
Mhm.
Um, I think and I've been told, because I've been out since 2017, I've told like that attitude's really changed a lot since I've been gone. Like,
Mhm.
mental health is a lot more kind of accepted, like getting help and stuff like that. So I hope so. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah,
I
that
agree.
mentality, and I was there. I think we were all there. Like, I don't need
Mhm.
fucking help. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
so it's not a sign of weakness to just be like, I just want to talk to somebody. And it's like,
Mhm.
it was very weird for me the first time I cried in front of this little old lady that I was talking to. I'm on the couch and I'm just bawling my eyes out, and like,
Yeah.
and then, but afterwards, and like the drive home, I was just like, it was like a weight lifted. I was
Mhm.
like, dude, that felt good. I kind of want to do that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so
It's like a little pressure release valve. That's what I always say.
yeah,
Like it
and I
always.
think
Yeah.
that's all a lot of guys need, so.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Well, shit, man, this was amazing having you on. Where can people find you? Where can they find your product? Go buy it. Get it rocking and rolling, so we can get it here in this, or manufactured in the States. So where can people find you? Link up with you. Buy the product, all that stuff.
Probably the best place is Instagram, Aaron and Archer on Instagram, and then doggyrate.unleashed.com is going to be the initial launch for that. And then after I'm going to let it be available there till it sells out, and then the next batch will be available there, and then Amazon, Chewy, Walmart Marketplace, and then I have some very big retailers that are already in talks of carrying it. That are very strong within our community. I'm trying to keep it in there. So,
Nope. Yep.
hopefully they're going to jump in there. But yeah, that's the best place. Aaron and Archer on Instagram. I'm Aaron and Archer on every social media platform, but I'm most active on Instagram, and then dogurateunleashed.com. So,
Awesome. Well, thanks, bro. Thanks for coming on.
thanks for having me.